Hey everybody, Adam here from Menta Watches. Follow me today as we meet with some really great clients and look at some really awesome watches. For the first part of this video, we got to sit down with my friend Danny Surfer. Danny is a well-known and famous restaurateur here in Miami, having two amazing restaurants that have been a staple of the Miami food scene for over 10 years now. Danny's been looking for a vintage Submariner, so we were able to sit down at one of his restaurants and take a look at some different examples. We are sitting here today with my good friend Danny, as we said before, at his wonderful restaurant, Mignonette, one of my favorite places, even though I don't eat a lot of seafood. The steak here is amazing, and all my friends love coming. Thanks for sitting down with us. So we talked, and I know you're a big modern watch guy.
Yes.
You have a bunch of modern watches.
I do.
Not a bunch, but a nice little collection.
I have a nice collection.
And we've talked for months now about getting you into vintage Submariner.
Right.
So I brought a few over just so you could kind of get an idea. We could walk through them. There's a lot of variations within the vintage Submariner world because they produce those watches from 54 to present day. So there's a lot of stuff, but I think the best place to start is probably somewhere in the 70s or 80s, which we have here on the right. We're going to go in chronological order, but I wanted to bring a few earlier pieces just so you can see. And I also brought my personal 6536. I don't think you're going to like this because we talked about it and the size is a little too small for you. You got bigger wrists, it's big manly wrists. But here, so this is a small crown Submariner, nicknamed the James Bond, even though James Bond wore a big crown, but has no crown guards. This is my personal one, just to give you an idea. Produced in the mid-50s, no crown guards on the side, a much smaller, thinner profile, much more like clean look, but smaller. You know, you could see the difference. Just the newer watches or the 40 millimeter upgraded watches, just a lot more heft to it, you know? So you could try it on, but I think, you know, considering the watches you already wear, you know, I know you've had ceramic subs in the past, probably too small for you, but I wanted you to see it, just in case. Pelagos.
It's vintage inspired. So
dude, I love this watch.
Now time to get real vintage.
Really, I have one coming in, the special one.
I like it a lot. I hadn't worn it for a long time, and I started wearing it recently on the rubber instead of that titanium bracelet.
Right.
And it's great for the kitchen. It can take a beating, and it's.
I was gonna ask, what do you wear when you're in the back in the kitchen?
I try and wear either a dive watch or a chronograph, because there's a lot of. I actually use them quite a bit.
Diving for oysters. You know?
Diving
we sell a lot of oysters here. So
I use it in the kitchen quite a bit to time different things. So for me, it's more convenient than using my phone because I have it right there.
Right.
And it works out.
So you're one of the rare people who actually uses the watches as they're intended, like a chronograph.
Yeah.
Actually,
I mean,
you're a rare breed, my friend.
Last night, even at home, I made a lamb roast for my wife, and I didn't want to use a thermometer, so I just kind of put the chrono timer on, 5 minutes on each side, 5 minutes in the oven, 10 minutes rest. It came out beautiful pink.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it worked out well.
That's awesome. So it doesn't look bad on you.
That's not,
you know?
they wear bigger, I think, than what the millimeters are. How many millimeters is this?
38.
Yeah, I feel like it wears, I wouldn't notice much of a difference between this and that's a little big, but this and like a more modern one. Why is it that it wears bigger? Is it like lugs or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just you're not used to looking at it,
right?
You know, so you're used to looking at a Submariner that has the crown guards, that has a bigger bezel. You know what I'm saying? So the proportions are a little different. But yeah, I don't know that for your first vintage sub, 50s is necessarily the way to go though, just because I don't want you to feel like you have to baby the watch, you know? Which, and again, this watch, this one's all original, even has the original crystal that's crazed, and it's lasted this long, still intact, you know, 80 years, you know, or 70 something years, excuse me.
That's impressive.
But, you know, you're using your watch a lot more than the regular person. Like me, I'm generally meeting with people sitting behind a desk, you know, driving my car. I'm not, you know, engage in too many activities with it. You know?
For me, I'd probably want to go as far back as I get a good vintage feel and look, but still can take a little bit of beatings. You know, when I'm working in the kitchen, maybe get some water, maybe I go swimming with the kids.
We're going to be on the right side, but let's start from the left. So I went in chronological order here, and actually in order of value from most to least, surprisingly, not on purpose. It was really chronological. So this is a 5513 Submariner, no date. The very first watch they produced in 40 millimeters with a gilt dial that was not COSC certified. So we're going to talk about that in a second, whereas compared to the 5512. So this is, I would say, probably the most popular vintage reference because people like the clean look of it. They're a little cheaper than the 5512s, which have 4-liners and COSC certification. So like a little better movement, you know, the beats a little faster. But This is an early one from the mid-60s with a gilt dial. So the gilt dials they produced only up until through, the 40s, 50s, all the way up until right around 65, 66, until they transition into the matte dial, which we have here, this is like circa 1967, this watch. The difference is really the way they produce the dial. So with the gilt dial, they had a literal gilt brass plate, and then they lacquered on top of it. So that's why it has like this shine to it. It's really beautiful. Like you have like these gold letters that kind of pop because they're not printed on top. It's literally the layer underneath. Right. You got to think of it like a sandwich. That being said, they're a little more fragile. They're obviously more valuable because it's earlier, more collectible. But you get interesting stuff like this where you have like a stretch rivet bracelet and stuff like that. But people, like especially the Asian market, for example, refers to these dials as mirror dials because they kind of like are like a mirror reflection back at you. It's really like a sexy look. I don't know why it's a very labor intensive process to make those dials, which is I think why they stopped making them, and they're more fragile. So obviously the matte dial is a little more sturdier, which is why you see matte dials more well preserved than gilt dials. But the sheer like beauty of these gilt dials, which is why collectors go crazy for them.
These don't click.
No, they don't click. They only started clicking with this watch. So all throughout the 70s, they didn't click.
With the plastic crystal?
Plastic crystal.
You really get it. You get like a more refraction. When you're looking at it like that, it's not just like straight. Like it's almost like you are looking at it underwater.
Right.
Oh, so these don't go both ways. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, exactly.
That stretch bracelet is super cool.
Yeah, so, they used to do stuff like this where there's a lot of interesting bracelets and they had stretch rivets, which are actually quite rare.
That looks like it's in good condition, too, for being so old.
Yeah, this is a nice one. So this is, I wanted, as far back as I wanted to go to show you, just to kind of give you an idea. Like I said, going further back in the 50s, maybe not for your first piece, like get there down the road. So right after the gilt of this one, circa 65, 60, 66, we have 1967, first iteration of the matte dial, although this is not a 5513. Like I said earlier, it's a 5512. The main difference being the amount of text on the dial. So this has 4, this has 2, and the movement's a little different. These 5512s were COSC certified, so they were able to keep time a little bit better. They're a little bit more collectible. They call them 4-liners. Collectors kind of gravitate to them more. I would consider them a little more rare as well. But I wanted you to kind of see the difference because these are literally produced 1 or 2 years apart, but with a completely different dial, with a completely different construction of the dial, a different way that the brand produced the dial and produced the watch, but similar look and feel, and it's kind of are you one of those people that gets into those nerdy details, like, oh, the 5512 has 4 lines of text and the movement's a little bit better, and it was a competition movement kind of, so to speak, that was certified, et cetera, or do you not care and you just like the aesthetic? And you need to decide that for yourself, obviously.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I can be nerdy about the details and the aesthetic.
Right.
It's interesting that you said these are produced like 1 or 2 years apart. How different they'll do things 1 or 2 years apart back then, and now you look at something 1 or 2 years apart, there's no difference.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was the interest. I have clients who have like huge collections of Submariners, like Watch Eric is building a huge collection of Submariners, and you could do that with the old stuff because there are so many different iterations, from year to year, they're all a little bit different. So you can't really do that with the new stuff. Like you get a 116610 and then you get a 126610, they're pretty much the same, just with one case now being a little bit bigger. A little bit.
I have the green dial 111610, and then also the newer black sub, the 126, and outside of the color, it's so hard to see really the difference between the two. It's not as obvious as these two if they were both the same color dial in.
Yeah, but for the layperson just looking down at these watches, like if I showed these to my wife and I asked her to spot the difference, she'd be like, I don't see any difference, So it just depends, Okay, so then moving on, these are the two that I think would be better suited for you as your first vintage Submariner. So this is we're going back to the reference 5513, but this one is from the late 1970s. It has what's called a maxi dial, that the lume plots are a little bit bigger. This is very at the end of the run, so there's even earlier iterations where it's even more prominent and noticeable. But kind of in the similar vein as these two watches, plastic crystal, same movement or similar movement, 1570 movement. They changed the bezel a little bit, very negligible differences, but the fonts are a little bit different. But it's a more common produced watch, so you wouldn't have to worry about screwing it up as much because the value isn't quite the same as the first two. It's
Parts?
very collectible, and you could get parts. You know, it's still very collectible, but it was produced for a much longer period of time, you know? So these 5513 matte dials were produced all the way from 1966 or 67 up into the 80s, you know? So there's a lot of different iterations within the matte dial 5513s, but there's a lot of them produced.
That one feels close to modern.
Right. Well, wait for the next one.
That's a 16.6.
So this is a 16800. This is the only date model I brought. So I wanted to bring you a sapphire crystal watch to show you what it felt like compared to your ceramics. This is right before ceramic. So this is when they transitioned to a sapphire crystal, and you have your click spring like you were talking about. And it still feels like a modern watch, you know? This one is an early 16800, so this is the reference right after the 1680, the very first date model Submariner. This is the model that came right after it, the first time they really, really upgraded it. And this is the early iteration with the same style of matte dial as these two watches before they transitioned to a gloss style, like what you have similar on your watches now. But I wanted you to check it out because it's a great way to get your feet wet. We call that neo vintage because it has the matte dial with tritium lume that developed nice yellow patina, but it still kind of feels like a modern watch because you have that sapphire crystal. But the bracelet's similar to this one, so it feels like a vintage watch on your wrist compared to the wearing the ceramics these days, you know?
This is early 80s, you said?
Early 80s, yeah.
That's that'd be a tough call between the two for me, but I'm always looking at the date.
Yeah. So if you need it, except for the pellicles.
No, that is a date. That's just no.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, but it's very small, which I like. I would go with this one.
I think.
Would you say I can get it wet?
So as long as we pressure test it, I make sure all the gaskets, you know, and if that's something you want to do, we could do it. Make sure my watchmaker checks it. I personally am not a fan of swimming with any vintage watch or neo vintage watch or any watch in particular. No, because like, listen, I have clients, for example, I had a client who bought a brand new 5711. He set the time in the morning, forgot to screw down the crown all the way, and it popped out. It was just the crown sticking out. His girlfriend pushed him in the pool, watch got flooded. You know, so like there's always something that could go wrong. So any watch that you really care about, I would ever swim with. Never go in a jacuzzi with because that melts the gaskets. I don't know why people do that. Don't ever do that.
I don't do it.
Don't do it anymore.
I won't do it anymore. The problem is, like when I'm in those situations, you know, I'd be at a resort, pool, or hotel, and when am I going to leave my watch?
No, well, this is absolutely a watch.
That one I wouldn't swim with. I meant more like
but
shower.
This you could, you know, any of these watches you can. These are all dive watches. You know, we can make them waterproof. You know what I'm saying? Out of the four of these, I would feel most comfortable with you using this one. And I think this is like the perfect entryway. And I preach this a lot, that these sapphire Submariners, GMTs, Explorers, like this reference or reference 16610 with a gloss style, are perfect entry points into vintage without getting super vintage, if that makes sense, you know?
Does that mean it's an even trade for this?
I'll have to crunch. Probably not.
Those are all beautiful. Is there like without getting specific, a huge price difference between?
So the 5513 gilt dials, they run around 30 to 35 grand. The 5512, this is a meter's first one, a little geeky again, runs in the low 20s, low to mid 20s. This one runs in the teens, the 5513 maxi dial, and this one runs in the low teens.
Oh.
So yeah, that's why I said they happen to be in descending order for price as well. So yeah, it's still approachable, and if you even wanted to get your feet wet, like on the last video, I talked about my 5 favorite vintage Rolex under 10K. I don't know if you watched the video. Of course you did.
I don't miss an episode.
Love the support. The 16610, which is basically the same construction of this watch, but the dial's a little bit different. It's a gloss dial with white gold surrounds. And you could get into that watch like in the 7 to 8K range, you know? For a nice one, no box, no papers, but a nice one, you know? And that might be a great entry point. And you know what? I have one at the office. Why don't we do this? Swing by this week, next week, whenever, and you can sit down and look at the two side by side before you make a decision.
I bring lunch from the other restaurant that has stuff you eat.
All right, awesome, dude. Well, let's make something happen.
All right,
cool.
Yeah,
thanks for sitting down.
Anytime.
Hopefully in a future video, we'll get to see what Danny chose as he's still mulling them over. The next part of this video, we got to sit down with a neighbor of mine, Nicholas, who's been collecting vintage Rolex for years and is looking to upgrade his collection. Let's take a look. All right, so we're here joined by my good friend Nicholas, who is a great collector for many years, vintage and modern watches. We've discussed over the past year or so about him selling some of his vintage pieces to trade up towards a Paul Newman Daytona. So he finally got his stuff out of the safety deposit box after months of promising to do so, and brought him over. I have no clue what's in the bag, so let's go through it. This is a cute little Lululemon bag.
It's a beach bag from Saint-Tropez, yeah.
It's cute. All right, we have a Patek Philippe box, but I know there's not Patek Philippe's in here. At least you gave me some indication of what you got. Let's start with box number 1. Very cool. We have a Rolex 6263 Daytona. I presume it's a 6263 unless it's a 6265 with a black bezel, big lead bezel, but let's say it's a 6263, big red. You've had this watch for how long?
18 years.
Oh, wow. So you got it when prices were cheap. What'd you pay for this watch?
25.
$25,000. Wow. The current market value on this watch for everybody watching is around, depending on the condition and how original it is, anywhere from 80 to 120,000. So good for you. Do you know the year of this watch or anything?
I have the papers in my safe.
Oh, we could pop it. Looks very nice.
And I had it when Boucher and Geneva was able to review them. I have that receipt as well.
Okay,
I
cool.
used to service it, but that's from 18 years ago.
18 years, so probably needs a service as well, but that's okay. The case is very nice. The dial is very nice. The bezel doesn't have any cracks. Hold on. I need to get a... All right, well, while we wait for that to check out the year and the serial, let's see what's behind door number 2. The Zenith Daytona. Very nice. So this is a black Zenith reference 16520, otherwise known as the Zenith Daytona, which was the first automatic chronograph movement that the Daytona was featured with instead of a manual wind, transitioning from a manual wind watch. They are called the Zenith Daytonas because they are fitted with caliber 4030 that were made by Zenith, because at the time Rolex did not have the capability to make their own automatic movement, and the only brand they trusted was Zenith, so they outsourced these movements to Zenith. So they are dubbed now by collectors these Zenith Daytonas. This is a Swiss-made dial, so I'm going to presume it's an A, U, possibly P serial, or it might be a replacement dial. But either way, these dials are generally pretty easy to find an original dial if it is replaced.
That's from 1988.
If it's 88, then it's for sure replaced.
80s, 1998.
98. Okay, that's
It's 25 years old.
right. A serial. Yeah, so it's good. Original dial. It's good memory on it you got there. Did you buy this like new?
Yes.
You bought it new. You were young.
Used, but new. It's from my 18th birthday.
It's a nice 18th
myself.
birthday gift. Interestingly enough, when I was graduating from law school, my parents had gifted my brother-in-law a two-tone Daytona for their wedding to my sister. And when I was graduating from law school, I really wanted to get that same watch. So I was begging them, if they wanted to give me a gift, and I was like, do the same thing. And two-tone Daytonas at the time were cheap. They were like $6,000, maybe $8,000. And I was like expecting this watch, and then we would go to dinner to celebrate, and my dad gives me his Jaeger LeCoultre Reverso Duo in gold, the only watch he ever bought for himself, and it was so much more meaningful. I was like a little disappointed I didn't get the Daytona, but then it dawned on me that like this watch is so much more special and important because it was the watch that really got me into watches. Getting back to this watch, do you have box papers for it? You remember? You do?
I do.
Okay, cool. So this one is worth in the realm of like 25 grand right now. So nice watch though, and always a mainstay, always classic.
Okay.
I see a trend of a lot of people who are getting like the new ceramic 116500s, and then the steel bezel right before it, the 116520s, and they're selling those to get back into Zenith because they want to get, back into like a little more of semi-vintage, and they like the feeling, the lightness of it a little bit more. Let's circle back to the 6263. I'm just curious as to what year it is because it will tell us whether the pushers are original or not. This is 6.1, so like circa 1979, 1980 even. It's right on the cusp. So what I would recommend if we are going to sell it, it would be better. These are MK3 pushers. The easiest way to tell are by the lines right here. The MK2 pushers are smooth completely, but in the later production years of the 6263 and 6265, they did use these pushers, but were right on the edge. The original pushers, you could get them up and have a watchmaker swap them. It'll cost you $2,000, $2,500, but it will immensely help the watch. And then you keep these pushers to the side because in most likelihood, this was swapped during service, these pushers. So reverted back to the original pushers would be immensely helpful because everything else in the watch looks great. So it's a worthwhile investment considering what you paid for it 18 years ago, just to make sure that watch is like 100% original when we do go to sell it, you know, if and when we go to sell it. All right, we have one more box. It looks like there might be 2 watches in here. I don't think any Pateks. Very nice. Very nice. So you bought the staples. So we have another Daytona. We'll start with that. We have a 6239 Daytona with small Daytona print, which leads me to believe it's most likely an early 60s watch because that's when this was produced. Has a stretch rivet. Looks like a C&I bracelet, so American market bracelet that is dated 1964. Yeah, so early 60s. I would assume this is right around like a 1.1, 1.2 serial because this is the dial that's correct for that. And I'm assuming you bought this a long time ago as well, right?
Yeah, I bought it, I think, prior to the 62, 63 or 62, 65.
Oh, so probably even before that.
I bought it in early 2000, yeah.
From Stefan also?
Yes.
All right, shout out to Stefan Medan, who is Worldly Watches. Follow him on Instagram or check out his website. He is a dealer based out of California, a good friend of both of ours, and he curates some excellent watches. So I'm assuming, yeah, you probably bought this same price point, cheap.
Yeah, this one I paid, I think, 19 or 20 or 21.
The good old days when watches were cheap. Yeah, I mean, it's worth, obviously, easily double that these days. Really nice piece. Has a sharp bezel. The case has been a little polished, but yeah, nice, honest, original piece. And last but not least, it seems we have a watch I know very well and love very much, a Jumbo Royal Oak Audemars Piguet, original 5402 C Series, which makes sense because this is an AP at 12 dial. So throughout the production of the Jumbo Royal Oak 5402, the earliest iterations A, B, and then through some of the C up until 1979, 1980, the AP logo was at 6 o'clock, and then they moved it up to 12 o'clock, but they didn't do that until around, and I know this for a fact, the end of 1979, going into 1980. I know that because they told me that when I was questioning whether my C had a replacement dial or not years ago. But it is Swiss only at the bottom, so it is a factory original dial. And considering this is a very late C series, and they made 2,000 of them, and this is number 1,800 and change, this is most likely the dial that was born with it. And they are the original thin hands with matching tritium lume. So yeah, most likely this watch was completely born this way. Original crown with no AP logo on it. When they would service these crowns and replace them, there'd be a little AP logo on them. Bracelet stamped all correctly. Yeah, nice watch. Nice watch. And you bought this years ago as well. So you did well. This is what I always try to tell people too, is that if you guys are patient with your purchases, the problem today is that so many collectors have watch ADD, you know? They buy a watch and then 2 weeks later they see something else on Instagram or my website or whatever. They're like, I want that instead. And they don't even have a chance to like enjoy their watches or let them appreciate, let them grow. You know, you bought these all years and years and years ago, enjoyed them, worn them, you know, and obviously now they're worth a lot more, you know, and they were worth even more before the prices came down a little bit. Markets go up, markets go down. You know, I'm assuming if you wait another 5-10 years, it'll be even higher. But, you know, you did the right thing. And so I guess the topic of the hour is, do you know what Newman you want yet? Have you done any research?
I've done some research. I'm just curious to see, what is what. I like the Panda. I have a couple of pictures of the things that I liked.
Right.
But I'm just curious to see where the market is.
So we don't have any in stock right now that I could show you. I would say your starter Paul Newman is a reference 6239, which actually is one of my favorites. That's the one that Paul Newman actually wore. He wore his with a Panda dial, white with black registers. 2 variants they have, white with black registers and black with white registers. The cheapest variant you're going to find is a black with white registers. And then a little bit more than that, I would say probably 10 to 15% more would be a Panda one, because that's the one he wore. In really good condition, what I'm going to want for you would probably start in the, let's say, anywhere from 225 to 250 range for a good black one, and then let's say 240 to 260 for a good Panda one, all the way up to like 300 for both to we get like the nicest one ever. Moving on from that, you have the 6262, which is also pump pushers, but with a 2-color dial, just white and black, no red outer track, like on the 6239. And we could also explore, if you like the style of bezel, like on the 6263 Bakelite, do a 6241, which is pump pushers, but with a Bakelite bezel. But those really start around the $300,000 price point.
I think it's the one I like. It looks a bit bigger, right? feels or
Well, I mean,
the
just because the bezel kind of pops, so it gives it a bigger piece of appearance. But technically, it's the same case size at 36 millimeters. If you wanted to do a screw down pusher one, we're talking, 450 plus, because you're going to start with the 6265, which is screw down pushers with a steel bezel, and then move into the 6263, which is screw down pushers with the Bakelite bezel. But then you're talking $500,000 and up. So I think for you, a perfect starter one would be basically the same case as this, but with a Newman dial, and our target would be, around $250,000 for a great example, either white or black. You know what I'm saying?
check everything is correct. The things you told me we have to repair to.
Yeah, which can be found. You just got to be patient, as you know. Like, to get the best watches, you need to be patient and not just jump at the first one that's there. Yeah. So do me a favor, look online tonight, this weekend, whatever. Make a decision, like, you want to go for black or you want to go for white. You really need to be sure. You know what I'm saying? And then
You told me the ones the white face with the black dials.
Assume it's going to be anywhere from 250 to 300. For a good one. Good.
The price.
Right. Exactly.
Which one I like better?
Yeah, and we have a nice chunk of change that should get you almost all the way there with these watches. But leave them with me. Let me do a further evaluation. Open them all up, etc. And then I'll send you a breakdown with all of the serial numbers and what I say the valuation is. What I think we could sell them for to start looking to fund that Newman.
Perfect.
Cool. All right.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. Exactly. If we're going to go for it, we'll go ahead and go ahead and order those pushers.
I'll go get all the paperwork, all those watches.
Yeah.
Just one, I have a service which I did. I refused because they wanted to change some stuff. I'm AP. So
Smart.
I didn't do it.
Yeah, it's crazy that.
But the originality of the watch, and then all of the other ones I have papers, and I have the paper from the service from Boucherer from Geneva.
Nice. Yeah, all that stuff helps. It helps the value. It helps the confidence in the watch,
So he was opened up, and he was confirmed that everything was original.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I can tell by looking at these that I don't expect any problems. Usually you can tell when a watch right off the bat is going to have issues. Too many parts were replaced. The condition isn't consistent. You know what I'm saying? These all are consistent, and if you're telling me you got them from Stefan absolutely knows what he's doing and is a very honest guy, so I don't anticipate many problems. But leave them with me. Let me take a look, and we'll go from there next week.
You let me know? Okay.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Good seeing you. We love sitting down with collectors like Nicholas, guys who have been collecting for years and years and years and are really passionate about the watches, not so focused on the money aspect of it. And we're happy to see that the watches that he purchased so long ago have appreciated so much in value. And we're really hoping we can source him that perfect Paul Newman in the near future. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed that video. We got to see a lot of awesome watches and sit down with some really good friends of mine. As always, please always remember to like, comment, subscribe, anything you can do to help us grow the channel and reach more people in our passion for vintage watches. And again, there is still time to enter the drawing for the vintage Rolex Datejust. We will link the information below. All you need to do is be subscribed to the channel and comment on that video. As always, thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one. Bye.